slides right now?
Yep.
All right, perfect. All right, yeah, let me get started. Hope everyone's Camp QMind has been good so far. Yeah, I'm just gonna give a little bit of an introduction to natural language processing. It is a pretty big field, but I thought I would just go over some common processes that go in almost every NLP project that you would encounter. And hopefully you are interested in what NLP can do. So just to get started, what is NLP? So I guess on a general scale, it's a branch of AI that deals with the interaction between computers and humans using language. So the ultimate objective is to read, decipher, understand, and kind of make sense of human languages in a way that's valuable. So most NLP techniques rely on machine learning to derive meaning from most languages. And NLP is the technology used to kind of help computers understand the human's natural language and what we're saying. So there's a lot of use cases, obviously, where NLP can be seen because text is everywhere. Some of those would include machine translation in applications you've seen like Google Translate, words processors like Microsoft Word and Grammarly that use NLP to check like the grammatical accuracy of text and spell check, for example. Interactive voice response like used in call centers to respond to certain users' requests. And then personal assistant applications like Google, Siri, Cortana, Alexa, all those things, text summarization. So those are just a couple examples of where we see NLP used in the real world. So what I'll be going over today is just kind of what to do with text when you get it in raw form, text preprocessing, basically what you do to clean up your data, but specifically for text. And then feature extraction from text, so basically finding the important features from the data that could help us make useful insights. And then a couple of machine learning or deep learning applications, basically applying those features to create a model. So yeah, let's get started. So before I start, I just want to go over kind of the text data hierarchy. You'll see that in NLP, there's a couple terms that are frequently used that you might not be used to. So it's good to kind of be introduced to that. So let me start with the bottom of the hierarchy. So that's a token. That's the smallest level of text, which can be like a sentence or an individual word. Then a document is some form of a group of tokens. So that's like a paragraph or a chapter in a book. A corpus is then a group of documents, like a book, an article. And then a corpora is several books, several articles that data scientists would wish to compare and evaluate. So you kind of get the gist. So if I do use those words, just remember what I just said. Okay. So to start off with text preprocessing. So before every NLP task, it is very important to clean up your text. This phase generally requires the most time and effort since the result of your model is only as good as the data that you're feeding into it. I'm sure some of you have heard that phrase, garbage in, garbage out. It's definitely real. So you want to make sure that the data that you're feeding into your model is in a good format and easy to use. So understanding the data that you're working with to determine the necessary pre-processing steps has to be done first, because not all NLP problems require every text cleaning technique to be applied. But I'm just going to give you kind of an overview of the most common ones. So here I have kind of the text cleaning pipeline. So from raw text, you then go into the text preprocessing steps, which can be under 3 categories. That's noise removal, normalization, and standardization. We'll go through each of these separately, and then that'll get you your clean text. At the bottom right corner of every slide, I indicate which part of the pipeline I'm talking about. So if you're ever confused, just look there. You'll see I'm either talking about this step, it's going to be under normalization or whatever. Just I have that there for you to reference. So starting with noise removal, this is basically getting rid of anything you don't want in your text, anything that's irrelevant. So noise refers to a piece of text which is not relevant to the context of your data. It wouldn't affect what the meaning or the things you want to get out of it. And yeah, some examples are stop words, which are words like the, and, or that come up really frequently and aren't as important in your data. That it also includes like URLs, punctuation, HTML tags, white spaces, all things that you generally don't need in your data set. Again, I'm saying generally because sometimes you do need them. So you need to definitely understand the data you're working with before you remove too many things that you actually needed. Okay, so going into tokenization. So tokenization is where you basically split up a paragraph into individual sentences or sentences into individual words. So I just have an example here, a random cool fact that I found. I don't know if it's true. The IKEA catalog is the most widely printed book in history. If you tokenize that, you can just see it's split up by every word. So yeah, and that is also under the normalization step. Going into stemming. Stemming is basically the process where a word is reduced to its root by removing inflection through dropping unnecessary characters. That's usually like a suffix. A popular model for that is Porter's stemmer, which we'll get to after. But there is one problem with stemming. The reductions that it does produce, if it brings it down to the root word, sometimes it is not an actual word. So one way to be careful with that is to sometimes use something called lemmatization instead of stemming, which is right here. So lemmatization, it's an alternative approach to stemming. It determines the part of speech using WordNet's lexical database in English. I will get to this in a bit. So this process is a bit more intensive and slower, but the results are more accurate. Lemmatization might work better when you're trying to determine text sentiment, which is kind of like the emotion of your text almost. But yeah, I have an example here where you can see how the stemmed form of a word doesn't necessarily make sense, like leaf and leave would be the stem form. But when you do that under lemmatization, it knows to switch that to leaf. So that's an example of where you would apply that. All right, so text standardization. So yeah, text data often has words or phrases that are not present in the normal dictionary, something like hashtags, acronyms, and slangs. So instead of kind of leaving those in your data, you can use data dictionaries, which is a manual thing where you're physically writing out what each slang or hashtag actually means. Or you can use something called regular expressions to remove those common noise, not noise, but like those examples from your text. And yeah, down here I have an example of a dictionary, what that would look like in code. And then here I have an example with regex, which is the library that would clean up those kind of things. So I just have a simple function on how to clean up a tweet filled with hashtags, the @ symbol, all of that kind of stuff. So you can see that there are built-in methods that can do that for you. There's a lot of documentation on this. It's pretty easy to implement, but at the end, after you see this, you get a clean text pretty much. Okay, and yeah, now onto the NLTK library. I wrote that it is your lifesaver. It is because a lot of the things that I just mentioned can be done in maybe 1 or 2 lines of code using this library, which is great. So NLTK stands for Natural Language Toolkit. It's the most popular library for cleaning text in Python. So it includes things like the Porter stemmer to perform stemming, WordNet Lemmatizer for lemmatization, tokenization tools, And here's a quick example. I'm using the same sentence that I did before. This is tokenization. Here it uses just by white space. And in the next line, it's by white space and punctuation. Really, it depends on what you want to get out of your data when you do decide this. Here's an example of stemming, lemmatization, everything that I just mentioned. So it's clearly something easy to implement, and all you have to do is import the library. All right, so on to syntactical parsing. So kind of think of your elementary school English, if you can, when sentences were broken down to identify conjunctions, subjects, attributes, nouns, verbs, adjectives. That's basically the same thing, but in NLP. It's identifying kind of the syntax and structure of sentences, which is really important for identifying kind of patterns and context in the piece of text. So this process can be split up into two parts. So first is dependency grammar. It's the relationships between words, and you can often show that relationships in the form of a tree. And then there's part of speech tagging. So every word has kind of an associated part of speech tag or POS tag. That would be a noun, verb, adjective, adverb, things like that. And it often requires looking at the preceding and following words combined with either rule-based or stochastic methods. Yeah, and then moving on to the importance of POS tagging. One of those things is word sense disambiguation. So basically, I have an example here where the word book is used in two different contexts, and in both sentences, they mean something different. So the first one, I have to book a room. That's used as a verb. The second one is a book, like a physical book. POS tagging would help you identify what kind of word is in each by looking at the surrounding words. So yeah, and those are some other examples. Like I mentioned before, lemmatization is possible because of POS tagging. You can also efficiently remove stop words that way. And yeah. So next is named entity recognition. So named entity recognition, an entity first, let me just say that, is an object in a sentence. It can be really anything. It can include noun phrases, verb phrases. So let's say I say the word Google, that's an entity, and that entity is an organization. And then named entity recognition is kind of like a subtask of POS tagging that detects named entities like person names, location names, etc., like I just said. And yeah, some common use cases, for example, classification. Maybe you want to help auto-generate tags or categories for content purely based on the text without manual labeling. I did a project last year where we built a named entity recognizer from scratch based on specific entities we knew we wanted to identify in the data set. Also, recommender systems. So taking the classification step one step further, you can recommend content based on referring it to specific entities. And then comment analysis. Maybe you have feedback given and you've done some sentiment analysis to see how things are going. NER could help you into it if there are specific named entities that are affecting that feedback. So yeah, again, you can use pre-trained models for this, or you can build it from scratch. But yeah, there's a library called Spacy, which can get that done. It can also do a lot of other things. So it's a more advanced library. It comes with a bunch of pre-trained models. It can do named entity recognition, POS tagging, like I just mentioned, dependency trees, statistical tools, and then it has a really cool visualization tool where it can tell you or like show you how all of these words are related to each other through labels and arrows. And it is pretty easy to use, so I do recommend looking at that documentation as well. Yeah, so bag of words is kind of it's measuring the frequency of a particular token in your text. It is, for analysis, pretty important to see how often your words are coming up in a certain piece of text. So you can also break that down into something called n-grams. So a single token would be 1 gram, token pairs would be 2 grams, and then goes down to n number of tokens can be known as n-grams. So when you're generally looking through a piece of text, higher frequency n-grams, those are probably stop words because stop words occur very frequently. That's something that's not as important, like we mentioned before. On the other hand, if it's a very low frequency n-gram, it comes up maybe once or twice, maybe that's a typo or maybe that's irrelevant to your text. But lastly, if it's a medium frequency n-grams, you should be analyzing that even further because those are probably pretty important words. Next is TF-IDF. So TF-IDF is basically a weighted model that analyzes how important a certain token is in your corpus. So it's kind of one step further from bag of words. So it's split up into 2 parts. It looks at the term frequency. So basically how often a certain term or n-gram is in your document. And then the second part is inverse document frequency. So as you can see in the equation there, it's the log of the total number of documents over the documents where your term actually, the number of documents where the term actually appears. So at the bottom there, you can see the total equation for TF-IDF. Again, this is giving you a score from 0 to 1 on the overall importance of that token or term in the entire corpus. And obviously there are built-in models to calculate TF-IDF. It's not something you need to manually code the equation for, but it's a very useful tool. So yeah, this is just a quick, this is a quick example. So yeah, again, what I did mention before is that it converts text into kind of vector models. So it adds weights to each token to describe the relevance, whereas bag of words counts the frequency. So I've shown you kind of a comparison. So if I only look at the sentence, the IKEA catalog is the most widely printed book, in bag of words, it's showing me the frequency of each word in that sentence, but then in TF-IDF, it's giving me an importance score. And here it showed that all of them are equally important. But then if I add a second sentence, you can see the same thing here, the frequency on this side, but then here for TF-IDF, it identified that from I love this book, book and love were the 2 most important words. And also because they didn't appear, a catalog, the other words didn't appear in that sentence, it got a score